Can entrepreneurship be taught, or is it something you're just born with as a skill? And how does building communities for networks of entrepreneurs enable them to do better and mightier things together? That's the topic of our conversation today with my excellent guest, Mike Raab, uh, who is the director of The Garage and co-author of the book found it. And so I hope you stick with me. It's going to be a fantastic conversation today. Kalisa, let's roll the opening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may happen to be. You've tuned in to Talk About Your Community. I'm Todd Nilson, your host with Clocktower Advisors. And the work that we do in this live stream is bringing in a variety of voices and perspectives around building meaningful, sustainable, thriving, even cozy online communities that work in the real world, in person, as well as in the digital. I think the strength is actually in both of those places. What about you? What brings you here today? Would love to hear from you in the chat. This is a live and interactive live stream if you're tuning in on Friday morning here at 10 a.m. Central, and would love to hear about your entrepreneurial experiences, your community building experiences. We've got a unique mix of folks who had signed up for the stream today, and looking forward to the conversation that results from today's interactions. But why don't we go ahead and jump right in? I want to welcome my guest here today, Mike Raab of The Garage at Northwestern University and co-author of Found It. Your co-author is Melissa Kaufman. Great to see you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Todd. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great. So, Mike, I've been excited about having you on for ever since we get you scheduled to begin this live stream here, and I'm wondering, just to kind of get us on the road of conversation here, was there a particular moment when you realized that helping students become successful entrepreneurs was your path in life, that it was your passion, the thing that you wanted to do?
Yeah, there have been many, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but I like to say I'm on my third career. But when I started working for Northwestern University, based in San Francisco, working primarily with alumni, founders, operators, and investors, I realized how this sense of community and affiliation and trust could unlock so much value, and in particular for student entrepreneurs. And one example in particular, there was a student here at the Garage back in Evanston on campus who was working on an early wildfire detection device. So he had seen in his hometown, communities devastated by wildfires because they went unnoticed for, days at a time. And he came up with this device. He had patented it. He had a working prototype. And what we were able to do through my work at the Garage San Francisco, which is our alumni network, was connect him to an alum who was working on a product for GPS communications in areas that didn't have good cell service. And this alum actually took the time and put some of his product people from his startup, which he had venture raised, and put them on the students project to help him figure out this key component that basically unlocked the ability for this device to work. And so realizing that when you have intentionality over connecting people, this is the phrase that I like to use is manufacturing serendipity. Like if we can identify those pieces where one person can help another because of this shared affiliation and trust and interest, then we can unlock so much value, and in particular for students. And it just helps us develop such ambitious, resilient leaders who are solving the problems that they see in the world.
I love that concept of manufacturing serendipity. It's something I want to get back to and get really delve into a little further in our conversation here today. But I wondered, you were alluding to the Garage as an alumni network, and I'm wondering if you could tell everybody a little bit more about your role there and the history of the Garage, because it's kind of famous.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the executive director now of the Garage at Northwestern University, which is a physical space, a community of a network of resources for all students at the university. So all levels of study, all schools who are interested in entrepreneurship. It was founded in 2015 by my co-author on the book, Melissa Kaufman, and has since grown. So we touch well over 1,000 students per year. We run 12 formal programs throughout the year, as well as other events and programming. And our goal really is to develop those leaders who are bringing their ideas to life and solving the problems that they see in the world. I originally got involved with the Garage back in 2019. I had been working in venture capital in San Francisco. I myself am a Northwestern alum, and the Garage was not around when I was a student. So like many of our alums, I reached out basically to offer myself as a resource and say, hey, this is awesome. I wish this resource was available when I was a student. If I could be helpful, let me know. And so I actually ended up joining the team based out in the Bay Area again, with the idea that we could cultivate this alumni network to, first of all, give first and have them connect and support each other and manufacture serendipity between them, but then build bridges back to students when relevant, when they're looking for mentors or help or advisors or that type of thing. So students at the Garage are working on a diversity of projects, everything from medical devices to solving student problems on campus, to food and beverage, to even enterprise software, anything you can imagine students are working on here. So I really think of the Garage as a network catalyst, right? To connect students to folks who can be helpful. I have a philosophy that, including with books like Founded, but all of the information about how to be an entrepreneur or run a startup is available for free online. So like the information is out there, but that's not actually what makes a successful entrepreneur. It's two things: one, the community around them, and two, the network that they're able to tap into. And I think those two entities are really what the Garage empowers students with.
It's a great inspiration, and one that I take to heart. I'm pretty active here in northeastern Wisconsin with the New North and with Progress Lakeshore, the local economic development arm of the area. And we do startup competitions and try to engage with students as well as area residents who have business ideas that they're trying to bring to light. So definitely take all of the lessons you're saying to heart here as we have this conversation today. Mike, just a side note of curiosity here. What was behind the naming of the Garage?
Yeah, so it is, after the Garage, like the famous startups were founded in, like Apple and Microsoft. And so named as Scrappy Startup Garage, but we are actually located in the North Parking Garage on Northwestern's campus. So we do occasionally get phone calls from people with parking issues. But really the idea is this is where entrepreneurs get their start.
Awesome. I love that connection with the history of innovation in tech and connecting the Northwestern to that. So cool. So I'd love to know a little bit more about what inspired you to write Founded then. Obviously it seems like, your experiences coming out of the Garage, maybe led towards, wanting to put some of those things down on paper, but would love to hear the story of that and how you and Melissa collaborated on that book.
Yeah, absolutely. So Melissa Kaufman approached me when she was executive director here, and I was her associate director, with the thought of we should put this down in a book. So essentially, as I mentioned, there's about 1,000 students coming through the Garage on an annual basis these days. And many of them are showing up day one with misperceptions about entrepreneurship or startups, or starting from the very beginning and wondering, like, how do I even get started? And a lot of times, we're working with them in office hours, one-on-one, and helping them kind of go through the steps. But there are some students that want to go through that more quickly, or, more voracious readers or that type of thing, as well as we wanted to be able to scale, our advice and our insight from, at the time, 5 years of working with students at the Garage, beyond just who could book office hours and Northwestern students who are paying Northwestern tuition. So the idea was take our experience and insights from starting and running the Garage, put it in a really accessible. I think a lot of the startup and entrepreneurship materials online are way too hustle culturally or way too far along. So put it in a book that was accessible and also utilized stories from real students to exemplify the frameworks and the methods that we talk about. And so over the course, it was really a pandemic project for the two of us to collaborate on writing this book. It was a fun project, a little challenging to make two people sound like they have one voice, but I think it ended up working out in the end. And now Founded is used in dozens of universities and high schools around the country as kind of their entry-level principles of entrepreneurship book for students to get started, which is not what we wrote it for, but it's amazing to see that it's been adopted like that.
Yeah, no, that's so great. And I just wanted to point out here. I'll put it up on the screen here. I love the subtitle, the No BS Guide for Student Entrepreneurs. I like that. The implied bias to like practical action. Like let's not talk about a lot of theoretical stuff. Or as you said, so much of the online stuff is about hustle culture and kind of being farther along in the process. I like the directness of what you guys put into that.
Yeah, our publisher wasn't as happy with BS in the title, but we think it's accurate. And I think there's a lot of individuals and creators that are trying to like make money off of selling entrepreneurship and stuff. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We're really just trying to make this information more accessible for more people.
Yeah, well, I've seen others use actually the fully spelled out version of that particular expletive, and I think it's hurt them in terms of SEO and being seen. So I don't think you've hurt anything by including that. I think your publisher probably got over it pretty quickly. So.
Well, except you can't advertise on Amazon with BS, so that was a lesson learned afterwards.
Oh, hilarious! Wow. So it's kind of looking through some of the lessons of the book. I always have sort of my community building hat on as I'm thinking about this, and as you're trying to establish fertile ground or a nice garden to be able to grow entrepreneurs in, if you want to use I'll belabor a metaphor a little bit with that. What part does community building actually play in getting student entrepreneurs to get their ideas to light? Because we have this sense of sort of like the heroic individual maverick who's just going to start up a little project and get their business going, and what that it sounds like I'm getting at one of the misconceptions around that.
Yeah, I think community plays an enormous role for any entrepreneur, but particularly for first-time entrepreneurs. Being a founder and working through ambiguity and not having someone tell you exactly what to do at what stage can be incredibly lonely and difficult and isolating if you're not surrounded by other people who have that experience or share that experience. An anecdote, we had the university president was visiting on Tuesday, and he was sitting down with some students. And one of them talked about, we talk about all these formal programs and outcomes, but for him, one of the biggest impacts that the garage has had is just knowing there's a place on campus where there's other people who are doing interesting things that maybe are not as traditional career paths, but it's welcome and it's celebrated here. And they can try something out and it doesn't work, and that's totally okay. And that's accepted. And they don't have to feel like they're like not on the right path or not following the right traditional career path. So one is just like that permission to like have agency. And the second is, I think of the garage, very much like first of all, it's a very collaborative space. So if you have a lot of ambitious entrepreneurial people, that could be a place that is intimidating or competitive. But the way that we've built the garage is that students are helping each other out, and they're actually each other's like biggest hype men and hype people and fans. And what's cool about that is you have students that are farther ahead and some that are just starting that serve really to be mentors to each other. So peer mentors. So on, one of the garage's resources is office hours, and you can have office hours with staff. You can have office hours with alumni, office hours with what we call founders and residents who are garage alums that are continuing to run their ventures after they graduated, but also peers. So folks who have a little bit more experience who can help you out with the first steps. And, speaking of like, I think part of building a vibrant and valuable community is the shared trust. And that comes from vulnerability. And one of the traditions that we've had at the garage since the very beginning is fostering that vulnerability by at our weekly family dinner events, inviting students to share their wins, but also share their fails. So they'll stand up in front of a room full of their peers and talk about something that they failed at and the lesson that they learned from that. And that gives everyone permission, one, to go try stuff that doesn't work because it's totally okay. But two, to trust each other and to want to give feedback and input and help each other out. So I think community is a huge contributor to success when it comes to first-time entrepreneurs.
That's amazing. There's so much I love there and that I'd love to unpack a little bit. So the idea of the family dinner is awesome. There's a community builder in our space called Jake McGee who does a a live dinner event that I think he convenes on a monthly basis. And that coming together, people and sort of sharing food and being together, that encourages that sense of vulnerability. Something that we struggle with a little bit in online community spaces, to sort of get people to feel that sense of intimacy or safety with each other, to be able to share that. It helps to have, as I alluded to in the beginning of the show, that live component where you are coming together. You do get to see the other person. You do get to know them a little bit. And to an extent, you can maybe do that a little bit through like video calls, but man, it really helps to be in person for some of that.
Yeah, I am a big proponent of in-person. I think we're fortunate that we're on a university campus where all of the students are. I noticed after the pandemic a huge craving for them to be in person and hang out here at the garage and be around each other. I know there's some statistics or at least anecdotes that, this is one of the most well-connected generations, but also one of the most kind of lonely and isolated. And so all of our, family dinners, we have speakers that are here in person because it's just more engaging. It's more real. You can go up to after the event and talk to them, and they're hanging around each other. So as much as we can do in person, I direct my team to focus on that, because I do think even in the moments where they're just hanging around doing homework, that's how some of our co-founding teams have found each other, as they were just talking about ideas, casually hanging out and like, oh, we should try. Oh yeah, let's do this. So I'm a huge proponent of in-person community building.
I've heard it said, and I think there's probably some research around this, that entrepreneurial systems develop best when there are a lot of collisions or interactions between people, and arranging those. I think this gets back to that idea that you had of manufacturing serendipity, engineering those kinds of opportunities for happy accidents, as Bob Ross, the painter, might say, is I think such a key element of that community building process.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, again, we're very fortunate here to serve students from all schools and all levels of study. So it's truly an interdisciplinary space. One of the events we have on a quarterly basis is called Startup Matchmaking. And so this is when existing teams that are looking for new students to join their team pitch for 60 seconds what they're working on, what type of help they're looking for. And hundreds of students who want to get involved in startups and entrepreneurship and join an existing team attend that event. This is actually one, this will contradict my last comment, this is one that does better over Zoom.
Nice.
And so I'll join a Zoom for an hour every quarter. They'll hear those 30 pitches, and then the second 30 minutes of the event, they can hop around to different Zoom rooms and talk to all of those founders and see if it's a good fit.
So 60-second pitch, that's not very much time. Is that like a Peshakusha that they had to do, or is it?
No, I mean, the idea is just, so this evolved naturally because as the garage got bigger and more popular, we always had teams being like, hey, I'm looking for new students, what should I do? And vice versa, students, hey, I want to join a team. And we found that by aggregating the supply and the demand quarterly, was able to increase the kind of exposure for that. So 60 seconds is really just a limit because we cap it now at 30 teams that can pitch. For reference, we have 50 teams in our residency program right now. So not even all of our resident teams are able to pitch. So we keep it to 60 seconds. So they have to be snappy and talk about what they're working on, what type of help they're looking for. No visual aids, no decks, just very straightforward. And then, the second 30 minutes, students who want to join a team can hop around and chat with all those teams. And if they don't get to chat with everyone, all of their contact info is available for the rest of the quarter at the garage, so they can follow up later.
Amazing. So one of the things that I'm listening for when I hear people talk about their communities that they're working in, no pun on the name of the stream, but is the kinds of things that I can do once I've joined a community, and particularly things that are almost sort of repeating rituals that give people sort of a sense of belonging, a sense of place. And so the family dinner was one, like, that jumped out with neon lights to me, like, this is something where, you're setting a tone by calling a family dinner. And it's sort of implying that there's this sense of intimacy around the space. Something else you mentioned was the co-working, just like encouraging people to work side by side, something I can do there where I can maybe start, just through casual conversation, ideas happen around that. The other one was this other event that you mentioned, the quarterly pitch. Um, when the garage was just kind of getting off the ground, I'm always interested in sort of like what were some of the catalyst events that made that catch fire and start to work. Were there certain rituals or things that started early on that you credit with just sort of the accumulating energy of what the garage became?
So I joined the garage about 4 or 5 years into its existence. So I wasn't around for the very beginning, but what I do know is the first step was just identifying the students around campus who were already working on entrepreneurial stuff. And for college students, as our family dinner is, getting some free food, buying some pizzas, getting them all together, hang out, and just start talking. And starting to establish the physical space as, oh, this is the hub for anyone who's like interested in trying something new. And then bringing in speakers, right? And accomplished entrepreneurs, folks who they could learn from directly. So that's really how family dinner originated, was let's get food, let's get interesting people, let's get them to congregate.
That's such an awesome story. I love it. So as I was kind of looking through some of the takeaways from the book, I found myself wondering, you talk in the book about how to think like an entrepreneur. And I'm wondering the extent to which any of those lessons that, for students, because this book seems to be geared, to students learning, how can community builders think more like an entrepreneur in the work that they do?
Absolutely. We do it. I think, we kind of followed our own advice building the garage that we wrote in the book, but also writing the book. And thinking like a scientist is part of that, right? So having a hypothesis, particularly around a problem that you think exists, and a customer or user that you think you can provide a solution for. And we are not precious at the garage about our new programs or events. We're happy to try anything. If we're hearing from students that there's something missing or they need something, we'll spin something up in a couple of weeks, present it, see if there's traction, iterate on the feedback. If it doesn't end up getting traction, we'll drop it. If it does, then we'll expand, or we'll think about how can we grow this smartly. So as I mentioned, we're at 12 programs at the garage throughout the calendar year now. Everything from our entry-level program, which is just a sign up, you get into our Slack channel, our newsletter about events, that type of stuff, access to some of our office hours, all the way to during the summer, we run an accelerator program called Jumpstart for 10 teams to work full-time on their startup over the summer. So we give them $10,000 and then programming to help push them along. But all of those 12 programs evolved from student needs over the past 9 years, and identifying, we could do better in this gap. We could add something here. We're just adding this summer, it's really exciting, a startup summer internship program where current students can intern at startups that began at the garage but are now out in the real world and report directly to those founders. So they get experience at early stage startups that have maybe raised a seed round, maybe raised a Series A. That's founders who are going to be their managers, have a great affiliation and appreciation for their time at the garage, and are now going to be mentoring students directly. So I think it's been a natural evolution of identifying what do our customers need? How can we kind of fill in those gaps and help them be more successful?
That's incredible. And one of the things that I like to listen for is, especially with what you're describing at the garage, it really is almost sort of a talent incubator that you've got there towards a very specific goal. And as I think about those kinds of spaces, you need elements of that are geared towards or looking towards acquisition of new talent, who are young people in this community who we can bring in to be involved with it. Maybe not even necessarily young people just in an educational program who want to build something and want to be involved and recognize that, hey, I don't necessarily want to join a company. I want to be involved with a startup, or I want to start my own organization. And like the things that attract people in there, well, having a great story is a great attractor. I mean, I think success breeds success. But then I'm also looking at, how you're engaging people once they're in that space. And then what you just shared that was lovely, was that people that have been successful, the alumni that have come out of that program, have found ways to stay connected and give back to the program as well. And I mean, you've described there like an ecosystem that is, has just these flywheel effects of just feeding itself and creating more success over time. That's an ideal kind of community build from where I sit.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on the term flywheel. That is the term I've used to the board of trustees here about what the garage really has the potential to do. Of now we have all these amazing successes who are able to make our current students, have better outcomes, who attract more talented and ambitious prospective students to the university. So as I understand it, every year more high school students are writing their Why Northwestern essays about the garage because they know it's a space for them to come and innovate. So it's kind of that talent funnel. So our focus is really on developing the students as individuals, not necessarily any of their individual ventures, but making sure that they have a great experience, they learn and develop as leaders here, so that after they graduate, they do have that affiliation and appreciation and want to continue to give back and be mentors and help current students. A great example of this is a student who graduated in 2019, Casey Kadir, who came up with a medical device, which is a safer brain drill. So neurosurgeons still use hand crank drills to puncture a hole in your skull, believe it or not. Sounds medieval. And she was in a new venture medical class here at Northwestern and teamed up with some other students and came up with this device that is electric, smart. Basically, as soon as it punctures your skull, it automatically stops. She continued working on it after graduation and just last May got FDA approval for the device to be in use. And just last October, the device was actually used in a patient at Northwestern Hospital. So from an undergraduate student coming up with a medical device to being used in a patient in 5 years. But what's really cool is she's a founder in residence at the garage and now has experience bringing a medical device to market. So any student who is considering doing that has someone who's just a few years ahead of them who's there as a resource for them. And I think that really speaks to the flywheel potential of spaces like the garage.
It's a great story. It's a great example. I'm wondering, with the 12 programs you mentioned and everything you have going with the garage, how much staff are we talking about to manage this? Like how big of a group is doing the day-to-day programming and outreach work?
Yeah, we're pretty lean here. So there's myself, there's an associate director of finance and operations, an associate director, a marketing and community manager, technology manager who manages our space and all our IT and AV, a program manager for our annual student startup competition, and now our alumni startup competition, which is also new this year. And then we also have a couple of administrative help and an individual who's out in San Francisco working with alumni as well. So super lean, again, when you're talking about interacting with 1,000 students plus a bunch of alumni who are all working on vastly different and diverse projects. So again, I think we have a big impact for the size of our team.
That's amazing. And then I'm also thinking in terms of what you were saying a little bit earlier about looking at any kind of new idea and then just seeing how it works and iterating on it. It feels like you're describing lean startup mode, sort of like that whole fail fast approach. Sure. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of how the garage looks at learning from failures or encourages students to kind of look at failure, and how maybe community builders might look at the same kinds of things and learn and quickly iterate, from mistakes that we all make, from time to time and trying to build.
I think this is one of the most important things, and we address it in the book. The misperception that failure is a bad thing and you want to avoid failure. And I can speak, when I was a student on campus at Northwestern before the garage existed, it was palpable in the air, the fear of failure. Like you were going down a traditional path. I was kind of weird. I was a film major, but which was like a little different. But there was not a ton of entrepreneurship on campus because that was not what was expected and that was not what was celebrated. I've seen an immense change coming back to Northwestern since the garage has existed, to one, normalize and celebrate that failure. And I try to reframe for students, failure is a signal that you're trying something new and hopefully learning from it. And if you don't want to fail, never try anything new and just live a boring life and don't innovate, and you won't fail. Is that the life you want to live? Or do you want to approach, obviously you don't want to continuously fail, but learn from those failures as a signal that you're doing something new. And so, I often see students with imposter syndrome who are, I've never started a company before. I've never recruited a team member before. And I always encourage them, well, no one did until they did. No one is born having started a startup. No one is born having recruited team members. No one's born having, gotten investors to invest in their company. You have to start somewhere. And I think about the garage, we think about the garage here as an opportunity to get the reps in and get experiences in. And maybe the first venture you start isn't going to work. Maybe the second isn't, but you're going to learn from each of those failures. And some great examples are that we have some alums who tried a couple different things when they were at the garage as students, but then when it got more traditional jobs, but then a year or two later, they left those jobs and started a new startup. And the reason that they felt comfortable and confident to do that is because they had all those experiences when they were students, when there was no risk, to kind of learn from their failures so that they know, okay, if I do this again, now I know how to do it right.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I like how you've been able to sort of work into their DNA then, so that's sort of their mindset. I feel like there's something to that business, like that it was maybe a good thing that they joined a corporate job or something like that, because I think that's something to get you over that imposter syndrome, to realize like, oh, well, people don't really know, or even sort of like these big enterprises that are supposedly so wise and all knowing really don't, and in fact, many times they're not equipped to deal with innovation as an approach. And so giving them a chance to kind of be into an organization and understand, oh, you know what, my idea for that other business, like if I tweak it a little bit, this is a really cool thing. Like, I don't think there's any wasted steps on a journey like that. I think that the lessons that you get from those experiences is so great.
Totally agree.
Yeah. I just wanted to give a quick shout out. One of our close friend of mine. This is Kurt Hallbeck. You can't see it on the screen up here, but said imposter syndrome is common across entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes. Yeah. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that at all.
No, again, it's the same thing I reframe for students of like, I think imposter syndrome is a positive signal that you're trying something new and you're going to learn from it. And, maybe so as I mentioned before, I'm on my third career, and that's because I like to have new challenges and have a high learning curve. And inherent with that is like, you're going to have imposter syndrome if you are seeking a high learning curve. If you only apply to jobs that you 100% are confident, you can kill in your sleep, then you're not being challenged and you're not learning and growing. So I hope that we can, I know imposter syndrome causes hurdles and hesitation and all of that, but if we're able to reframe it as a positive signal that we're growing as individuals in our careers, I think that's a really powerful reframe.
I had I don't want to call it a mentoring call, but it was a peer support call with a friend in community building this week, and I think she was trying to face down a lot of those fears, and I was trying to say almost the same kind of thing. I think you expressed it much better than I can. Nobody did it until they did it, right? I want to put that on a T-shirt or emblazon it across the sky. That people you need to embrace those opportunities to try something new and grow. It's the if you don't use the muscles, they atrophy and go away. So thank you for that. That's great. So thinking back to the early days of the garage and kind of getting it off the ground and sort of when it was happening, in learning from failures there, the things that didn't work. If you had to start from scratch, you were going to be in a new region and you wanted to establish this sense of entrepreneurship among students and maybe even local populations. I'm asking for a friend. What would you do? Like, would you do anything differently? How would you get started? What would that blueprint maybe look like for you today in 2024?
Yeah, I can answer in a few ways. Again, I wasn't around for the beginning of the garage, but I can speak to some of those 12 programs that I mentioned. One is called Luminate. It's for first generation and low income students. So they meet on a weekly basis as a cohort. They get up to $1,000 in initial funding for their ventures, as well as a mentor who's someone out in industry. That was a copy of a program we started in 2018 called Propel, which is for women entrepreneurs. So when the garage first started, it was primarily male engineers who showed up, right, and felt comfortable and confident in the space. So we've been intentional since then to build programs. As you mentioned, this is really a place we're trying to be accessible for talent of all levels, from all schools, all levels of study. So not to say that it hasn't worked out. We've figured it out and built the programming so that we do reflect the greater Northwestern body. But I think some intentionality in where we're reaching out across campus would be really important. As far as, I'm not sure if that's relevant to like starting a new entrepreneurial community. I mean, it certainly is, but something that might be more relevant. When I started working for the Garage in San Francisco and building out this alumni community, I came across and I heard from a lot of people all this different types of software that would automatically connect people and make them meet and X and Y and Z and Slack groups and all this stuff. I am the biggest proponent of you need a community manager who is a relationship manager who gets the right people in, connects them to the right people, and keeps the wrong people out as well. And again, this goes back to the manufacturing serendipity point. I think one of the strongest things about community is when you can extract and make more visible and accessible the needs, the gives, the asks, who's looking for what, and have someone. You can, of course, have a CRM or a database where you're tracking this stuff, but have someone who, when they're talking to someone, knows who you should talk to and makes that introduction right away. It happened just today. I got an investor update from one of our alumni who started a company, and hey, I'm looking for people who know about creator economy contracts. I mean, I thought, oh, Lauren, who's a senior, she's done all this stuff with creator economy. Lauren, would you be interested in chatting with Jake? She's like, yeah, sure. And that willingness for those two people to opt into those introductions and connections is something that's just kind of baked into the community at the Garage. And I think if you're starting a new community, making sure that you have an individual who's able to make those introductions, manage those relationships, get the right people in, is the most important thing you can do.
Man, 100%. One of the top reasons that the communities struggle and fail is if they don't have a dedicated community manager, somebody to be that relationship builder and connector with others. And it's not just somebody who's there in an administrative capacity. This is somebody who is, the cheerleader, the evangelist, whatever you want to call it, the catalyzer, that is just so fired up about making those connections between people. And it makes me think, like, one of the situations that I'm kind of looking at right now, even locally, is trying to connect local university talent with opportunities, for entrepreneurship, in the area. And I don't know, like some of the local universities around here use this intermediate platform called Handshake for internships. I hate it. I absolutely hate it, because it cuts out exactly what you said, is that somebody that is making introductions and making those relationships. I've asked at least, half a dozen times to say, hey, can't you just put me in touch with somebody who is, has direct contact with the students, who might be able to say, who has a particular background that might be a good fit or whatever. Like, I'm looking for those organic connections and not those automated connections, that come through. Technology is great, but when it becomes sort of this intermediary force, it takes the juice it takes the life out of things, it feels like.
100%. And, I don't want to sound like a total technology laggard, but like, I think there is something to the human component. Like, communities are human driven, they're relationship driven. And I think we just naturally trust and are more likely to buy into introductions made by humans who have context, and you trust, oh, if Mike's making an introduction to this person, there's a good reason for that, rather than this software matched me with this person. Oh, now I have to like take a coffee chat. I don't know why. I think the human component is the most important component to communities. Yeah,
no, here. That's great. Well, Mike, this has been a wonderful conversation. Hard to believe we've shot through 40 minutes already as we're going, but I wanted to offer a chance, if you have some things that you're working on right now, or issues that the Garage is addressing, anything you wanted to bring up that's on your mind at the moment about the entrepreneur community at the Garage. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, Todd, I think just the number one thing is check out Founded. Over here. There we go. The No BS Guide for Student Entrepreneurs. As I mentioned, Melissa and I wrote this book really to make entrepreneurship more accessible. It's used in dozens of universities and high schools. And we really wanted to get it in the hands of not only students, but just first-time founders to make it easy to kind of get started when you're bringing your idea to life and solving problems that you see in the world. So would appreciate sharing that with anyone who might be interested.
That's awesome, Mike. And yeah, thank you so much for this. What a fun conversation. I've learned a lot from what you've been able to share. Hopefully, others on the call here as well. I think Kurt had one final comment here. I'll just kind of add in. You mentioned check into Unext, the former UW Green Bay startup. Yes, I am a little bit aware of those guys. I've actually had a conversation or two. Yes, they are trying to match students with entrepreneurial opportunities, and there's certainly a lot of voices out there, a lot of people trying to build that. And by the way, I'll add too, like I'm a huge tech head. I'm not anti-tech. I just want it to be used in human ways, so that we're not caught behind systems, but that it actually enables better connections for folks. Just curious, do the 1,000+ students and alumni involved with that? Is there beyond Zoom calls an online component to what you guys have?
Yeah, primarily Slack is our main kind of asynchronous communication, where we have all the different programs, have channels, communities, alumni, all that type of stuff. So I think that's one thing that's, it's difficult rather to start a new Slack. I've seen hundreds of Slack communities die when they try to start from scratch and there's no traction and people show up and no one's posting anything. But we have been able to snowball this to actually work, where students are checking it on a regular basis and contributing. So that's been a big win for us.
Any particular lessons to share about how you were able to snowball it?
Yeah, we've found champions who are students, around the garage who we would kind of poke and prod to like post stuff and be helpful. And I think it's one of those things where the community norms when you show up are what you adopt. So when a new student would come in and see that other students felt comfortable posting, then they were comfortable posting. But it's hard to cold start that from scratch. So kind of planting some seeds definitely helps.
I'm so glad I asked about that. That's just such a nugget of wisdom, and I think so many community builders need to hear about that. Particularly, I think the way that you put that, the norms that exist when you join a community are what you end up adopting, and just so important that early socialization and onboarding happens, especially for all the things we discussed about like why in person can be much more powerful at establishing those norms and that sense of connection. It's harder to do in a digital text first kind of space to manage all that. So no, thank you. Mike Raab, man, it's so good to spend some time with you today. Really appreciate everything you've shared. Would love to have you back on the show anytime you want to come back and talk about your next book or the successes of the garage, things that you've done in that front. But for those of you who joined us, I am so glad you were able to tune in here on the live stream. If you're tuning in on the replay on YouTube or LinkedIn or any of the other channels that we cross broadcast to, would love to hear your questions, your experiences, anything that may be on your mind around building communities of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship and talent. I'm sure that Mike and I will both be glad to jump in and have some conversations with you about that. In the meantime, I do want to call everybody's attention to the next live stream I'm going to be doing, which is going to be on Friday, April the 26th at 10 a.m. U.S. Central. I'm going to have my longtime friend and guest, Sai Alhir, who's the author of a book on anti-fragility. He is I will call him, he'll probably be uncomfortable with this, a genius of organizational design and rewilding. He's going to be coming in and talking a little bit about anti-fragile, resilient, and agile ecosystems. These are all slightly different things, 3 pillars that support ideas of rejuvenation, regeneration, robustness over time. So it's going to be a conceptual discussion, but one I think which will have profound impacts on your efforts as a community builder. Save it on your calendar. We'll have it up. I believe it's actually up online. Khaleesi's nodding yes in the background here. So definitely sign up for that as soon as you can. He is a fascinating, wonderful guy and a dear, dear friend. So until then, Mike, great to see you. Thank you for joining.
This was fun. Thanks, Todd.
All right. And for those of you, have a great weekend. Take time for yourself and keep building great communities. Khaleesi, roll the credits.